Welcome back to another tidbit from the Bible. I'm Dr. Paul Petersen. We are studying Paul's epistle to the Philippians and to the Colossians. And today our focus will be the last verses of chapter 1 in Philippians, beginning in reality in the middle of verse 18. Now, as we do that, we may advise each other to run through the first 18 verses of the chapter in order to have the sense of the flow of the thought. Paul has been speaking about how the gospel is spread by different people with different motives, but whatever he is enjoying, that it is shared with others. And he says so in the end of the section beginning of verse 18, and because of this I rejoice. I'm reading and will be using the New International Version today. And then he continues, and let me read through as I comment on the verses. Yes, and I will continue to rejoice. So having spoken about the joy that he has experienced hearing about the spread of the gospel, he's now speaking about the joy of the future. That is, this work will continue, it will go on. And then he describes his own situation in verse 18, for I know that through your prayers and the help given by the Spirit of Jesus Christ, what has happened to me will turn out for my deliverance. Now, some translations say salvation. Soteria is a Greek term, and that could be salvation in the wider, more spiritual sense, but most likely it is deliverance in a more narrow sense. He trusts that he will be delivered. He is going to be presented to the emperor to defend the gospel and then be delivered. That is the point here. He continues, I eagerly expect and hope that I will in no way be ashamed, but will have sufficient courage, so that now as always Christ will be exalted in my body. Now, this was a culture of shame and honor. And Paul feels secure that Christ will not be ashamed through him. When he speaks about shame, it's a shame of his own potential negative behavior, if he is unfaithful or illoyal to Christ. When he speaks about honor, the honor belongs to Jesus Christ. Now, the expression be exalted in my body may be misunderstood in a culture where we very easily separate body from soul or spirit and see the human beings as divided into two different substances, matter and spirit. That's not the case here. You could as well say, will be exalted in me. He's simply speaking about himself. As often in the New Testament, when soma is mentioned, the Greek word for body or corpse, then the point is me. That is the whole of him. Whether by my life or by death. And here comes the options. He doesn't know. He feels convinced that he will be delivered, but he doesn't know. There's still those two options. Maybe he will die as a martyr. Actually, that happens later in life, not in this connection, but later, or he will live on. And he then exclaims this very famous saying, for to me, to live is Christ and to die is gain. Some takes this to be, he wants to escape from life in general. No, this is a particular situation. Whatever happens. If he lives on, it's for Christ. If he dies, it will be gain too for the gospel and for himself. He continues with some related practical deliberations on his call as a minister of the gospel. If I am to go on living in the body, this will mean fruitful labor for me. And by this, he says that if he is going to live on, he will continue his service for Christ, and people will be won for Christ and for the church. Yet, what shall I choose? I do not know. I'm torn between the two, and then you have his deliberations more explicitly. I desire to depart and be with Christ. That is, if he dies, it's all over, and the next he will see on the day of resurrection will be the face of Jesus Christ, and he will be with him forever. Which is better by far, he exclaims. But it is more necessary for you that I remain in the body, that is, that he stays alive, because then he can serve the church. Convinced of this, that is, convinced, we are reading verse 25, convinced that he will be delivered, I know that I will remain and I will continue with all of you for your progress and joy in the faith. Once again, joy, rejoicing is an important concept in Philippians. If you want to read through Philippians quickly and put a little mark or write it down, every time Paul is mentioned joy or rejoicing, you will discover that this is a main theme. Joy in life, joy in death, rejoicing in Christ, whatever happens. And then, so that through my being with you, again your joy in Christ will overflow on account of me. So he has the two options in front of him. He does not know, though he is convinced personally that he will be saved or delivered in this case. He doesn't really know, but the two options are either he will die as a martyr, and in that case, to him it's fine. Christ will be honored and glorified, and he himself will see Jesus as the next on the day of resurrection. The other option, he will survive, he will live on, and then he can be of service to the church and see the joy of the church in Jesus Christ. Then he turns to a kind of proposition, describing in verses 27 to 30 an alternative community. He is describing the Christian community as an alternative to the world. Some has, because he's writing to Philippians, and because Philippi was an Italian colony, has called this the colony of Christ. Let's read from verse 27. Whatever happens, conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. And there are two very interesting ways this is phrased. In a manner worthy of the gospel. Worthy, from the Greek axios, is important because if Christ is to be honored, those who profess to carry his name needs to live in such a way and behave themselves in such a way that Christ will be honored. That is, they are to live worthily. And the term for conduct yourselves is also interesting. It is in Greek politeuomai, and that is a term with political overtones. That is a term that speaks about how you behave as a citizen. And the Christian is here presented as a citizen of the kingdom of Christ, in contrast to the citizens of Philippi. That is, they belong to the colony of Jesus Christ. And doing so, you live with other values, with other ethical values and goals. Then he continues in verse 27, whether I come and see you or only hear about you in my absence, I will know that you stand firm in one spirit, contending as one man for the faith of the gospel, without being frightened in any way by those who oppose you. And once again, when Paul here speaks about one spirit, I think that's the word used here, he's not speaking about a dualistic view of human beings as an anthropological view. He's speaking about the church collectively, that is, standing together in fellowship, in mutual love, as one man, one person, united in Christ. Then he adds, and are not scared by those who oppose you. That is a reference to the enemies. This is a sign to them that they will be destroyed, but that you will be saved, and that by God. If you read commentaries, you will find that this particular sentence may be grammatically confusing. There are many options. I think New International Version has chosen a version that is fairly well understandable. The oneness of the church and their behavior living worthily of the gospel is a clear sign to their enemies that they are on the wrong path, the path of perdition. While the church is and will be saved, they are on the path of Jesus Christ. For it has been granted to you on behalf of Christ, not only to believe on him, but also to suffer for him, since you are going through the same struggle as you saw I had, and now hear that I still have. And what is that struggle? It is not only the struggle to survive the persecution. No, actually, even if Paul had been martyred, and he would later become a martyr, he could still be winning the struggle. That is, in honoring Jesus Christ by his faithfulness, his loyalty. And the church members are in the same struggle, honoring Jesus Christ by mutual love, by faithfulness. And that is where Paul will take us in the next chapter, as he gives us examples, with one particular example, the example of Jesus Christ as a high point. Examples that show that it is possible to live such a way, that this community of Christ is for real. Thank you for listening and being part of this tidbit, and welcome back as we continue in chapter 2 with the most wonderful hymn of Jesus Christ.